So this is exploring the areas of hurt and healing. So here are our different learning points for today. First, we're going to define healing. Next, we're going to understand why healing is an important focus of sexual violence services. Then we're going to explore the areas of hurt and healing as a concept. And then finally, we'll wrap up today by examining how the different areas can guide sexual violence services. And you'll notice me try to take intentional pauses. I have the ASL interpreter's video up to make sure that I'm speaking slowly and accurately so everyone can hear. Or understand, sorry, that was wrong choice of words. Okay, so our first section, what is healing? What is healing? Why is it important for sexual violence services? And why is there a whole 2-hour webinar dedicated to this topic? The first thing that we're going to do today is really hear from each other, right? This is a webinar. It isn't a webinar format, but we want to try to make it as interactive as possible. So we're going to do a Mentimeter. For those of you who've never heard of Mentimeter before, this is a live polling feature. And so there's a feature and a way to do this anonymously, and that's what we're going to do today. So you are going to go to www.menti.com and then type in the code 4970 473, or if you're a little bit more tech savvy, you can take your cell phone, point the camera at the QR code, and then it should pop up that way. Norio has also put a link to it in the chat if you are on a desktop or a laptop. And so I'm going to give everyone a moment to get there, and then I will switch my screen. Again, the code is www.menti.com. Or sorry, that is the web address. And then the code is 4970 473. Okay, I'm going to switch screens now. Okay. Can everyone see the Mentimeter screen now showing up? You can just put like a yes or a thumbs up in the chat. I just want to make sure. Okay. So we asked you all, and this is some of the things that you all said. What is healing? Transitioning out of the hurt into healthy. When your body or mind faces what has been, I think this does hurt. Whatever one needs to be happy, content. Ability to process trauma and understand what happened, with hopefully the ability to forgive and own the pain you've been through without it defining you. Process of becoming healthy, working on yourself. Learning to live again with peace and acceptance. Healing is moving forward and working through trauma in a way you can cope with the hurt. Getting relief from something or a situation. Knowing, I think this is knowing that there is more life than the person that hurt you, forgiveness. It is a process where coping mechanisms are adapted while understanding the trauma a person has been through. A process with ups and downs. To process through what happens that caused you hurt or trauma, to accept and then move forward. Acknowledging a situation or feeling of hurt and choosing to take steps to actively reshape how it affects you. A process with ups and downs. Okay, I think we read through most of them. Oh, a long-term process that comes in waves. We're going to move on to our next question, and thank you all so much for your input. And someone in the chat said, it's wild how everyone's is so different, yet still relatable. Absolutely. Our next question is, why is healing important for sexual violence services? Why is healing important for sexual violence services? Trauma stays in the body. Feel a sense of safety and wholeness again. You can't move forward if you're still looking back, because healing is possible after experiencing sexual violence. Become a thriver. Oh, I've never heard that as like a noun before, but I like that. To form healthy sexual connections. Healing is vital for SV services because we are trying to empower our clients. In order to move on, they need to heal, so that victims can transition to resilient survivors. Need assistance to facilitate healing, justice, and advocacy. The hurt is not healed. The survivor may turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms that can lead to further harm. Are always going to be trauma activators. Healing is vital for one's health. Healing helps them build resilience to move forward. Sexual violence is so violent and traumatizing that it will keep you down if you don't heal. Healing is important. Stop this girl. Sorry, everyone. Know that wasn't their fault and it's okay to heal. The body keeps a score, helping the survivor begin to trust again. To move on in a healthy way and live a good life, be able to move forward and begin to process. Let's see. Okay. Healing is important for sexual violence services because most survivors are not aware that it's possible to heal, begin to be able to continue living. If someone doesn't heal, then they will be stuck in the trauma. Helps one move towards coming to terms with the trauma and learning to let go without forgetting. It just means that you redefine your trauma. Healing is important because it allows yourself to overcome the things you've been through and try not to hold on to it. You can move forward and not allow that situation to control you no more. So thank you all so much for sharing all of your thoughts with healing. If you attended the webinar today, I am going to send you a copy of the slides after the webinar, and I will also send you a copy of this Mentimeter as well. So thank you all so much. So switching back, right, we talked about what is healing and why is it important? And I agree with what a lot of you all shared today, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. We also have a definition that we use when we're talking about it. We define healing as caring for the many parts of oneself that have been interrupted by trauma: physical, emotional, social, mental, spiritual, and more. So now that we know what healing is, and you all have given your definitions of why it's important, we have this scenario that we're going to be using throughout the webinar about this person named Jaden. And really, his story is why we say healing for sexual violence advocacy and healing at the center of sexual violence services is important. Jaden was sexually abused by his mother's uncle as a child. He is currently incarcerated on drug charges and is about to be paroled. His mother offered to let him stay with her, but informed Jaden that, quote, forgiving her uncle would go a long way in bringing the family together, unquote. He has nightmares about the abuse and is worried about reconnecting with his girlfriend, Faith, whom he has just told about what happened as a child. He's also worried about going back to church in his small town. So the question we want you all to think about and reflect on for the next couple slides is, what services could your agency provide to Jaden? So we don't know everything that's going on in Jaden's life. We don't know everything that he's been through, all the good things that have happened in his life. But knowing what we do know, what services could your organization offer Jaden? And this feeds into our why, right? Why healing services? We focus on healing services because the criminal legal system doesn't always meet the needs of survivors. And that's for a couple of different reasons. One, we know that the role of the criminal legal system, in part, is to prosecute those who have broken the law, right? And that means that prosecutors work for the state or they work for the United States government, and the state's pursuit of justice often doesn't align with what survivors need and want. Two, not everything that is considered sexually harmful is illegal, and policies like statutes of limitations limit what can or what cannot be prosecuted. Three, the criminal legal system doesn't represent safety or justice for everyone, and it doesn't represent safety and justice for all communities. Not only are some populations overrepresented within the system, but sexual violence-based convictions are especially low. This is just really for the people who are labeled as victims within the system. Particularly with Jaden, who we're talking about today, he is a survivor who's also been prosecuted by the system. And that person that harmed him will never go to prison, right? So that's important to realize when we're talking about the criminal legal system, who sees safety and justice within these systems? Even if there is a police report taken, an arrest made, a trial, a guilty verdict is found, and then on top of that, that person is sentenced, this still may not bring the comfort and healing in the lives of survivors that they want, right? So even if everything, quote unquote, works correctly or happens the way that it's supposed to, that doesn't mean that it's going to be safe and healing for survivors. We also know that the system doesn't work for all survivors because some survivors don't disclose right away. In particular, sexual violence survivors may not disclose till years, months, years, even decades till after the sexual violence has happened, if they disclose to anyone. Of those who do disclose, even less want to report to law enforcement. And maybe part of that is for some of the reasons that we discussed on the last slide. And then lastly, they don't always meet some of those systems qualifications. So for example, while victims' compensation can be helpful for some survivors, not all survivors qualify for it, And some victims' compensation boards don't approve and accept all of the claims. Or if someone wants to get a T or U visa, they have to cooperate with law enforcement investigations. And what that looks like isn't very clear. Particularly when we're talking about Jaden and Jaden's situation, he may not qualify because of his felony conviction in some places. So we know that many of these systems responses are time-bound and have barriers, which actually limit the options that survivors have. And these options that they do have are inaccessible or unfavorable to survivors, or may cause them further harm if they participate. Why healing? Why healing services? Because you are already told me, right? Healing is important because survivors need it. Sometimes it's the only thing that survivors need. And we know that the criminal legal system wasn't designed to meet the needs of survivors. Yes, it has been changed to be more trauma-informed. Yes, you all are doing advocacy in your communities so that survivors can better navigate it, but that's not what it was designed initially to do. And we know some of the things that survivors ask for, particularly sexual violence survivors ask for, like emotional support, can't be just given with the form. And while the criminal legal system might be able to connect survivors with some of those physical resources, when we ask survivors what they need, it's been this stuff on the slide right here. They need to be believed, listened to, and supported in their trauma, to meet their holistic needs, to receive that emotional support, and to be supported no matter what, when it happened, when they disclose, and if or how they participated in the criminal legal system. So going back to Jaden, and we're going to be talking about this story throughout the whole webinar, a lot of things that we know that he needs do not impact his physical safety or aren't typically a part of what our crisis response would be. Instead, he needs a lot of support in the different areas of his life. But this is the main reason why we focus on healing-centered services. We focus on that because it's what survivors consistently tell us that they want. No matter when they disclose, no matter their identity, no matter if they're in contact with the criminal legal system, no matter who they told, survivors have a desire to heal from the trauma they have and will continue to experience. Now, that doesn't mean that survivors who don't find what they need or who want to interact with systems can't access healing services. In fact, it gives them even more options to try to find healing, safety, justice, and accountability. So let's read through Jaden's story again. Jaden was sexually abused by his mother's uncle as a child. He is currently incarcerated on drug charges and is about to be paroled. His mother offered to let him stay with her, but informed Jaden that, quote, forgiving her uncle would go a long way in bringing the family together. He has nightmares about the abuse and is worried about reconnecting with his girlfriend, Faith, whom he's just told about what happened as a child. He's also worried about going to church in his small town. So we focus on healing because healing services can help us meet Jaden's needs. Even if he doesn't qualify for our other referrals, he doesn't want to report, we can still help him in his healing journey. So that was kind of a prelude, right, to make sure that we all understand healing, why it's important. And thinking more about those Mentimeter answers, you already got that down. I saw there was a question in the chat about if there's certificates for this webinar. There are not, but if After the webinar ends today, I'm going to send everyone who attended access to the YouTube link and the materials that will be shared. And if you need a verification of attendance, you can email me directly. I want to make sure that I'm answering all the questions. And feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box and in the chat box, and someone will respond to you, or I'll respond to you at our next break. Okay, let's get going. So this is the reason you all came today, right? You wanted to learn more about the areas of hurt and healing. So this is a concept that RSP adapted and came up with to really hone in on the idea of holistic healing and make it real and tangible for advocates to use in everyday advocacy to help survivors. And so we're going to really spend a lot of time today talking about this wheel and getting to know it. And hopefully by the end of the webinar, you'll feel comfortable using it in your advocacy. A lot of times when we talk about healing, and especially we as natural TA providers, with all of our time to sit and think, some advocates tell us, like, that's great, lashae, but what does it mean to actually talk about healing? How do we explain it? What does holistic healing even mean? And how do I do it? So one way to talk about it is to start by knowing what the different areas of hurt and healing are. We have heart and mind, or it might just say, I think it says heart on a later example that we'll use. Our body, basic needs, spirituality, relationships, culture, and our sexuality. So these are areas and places of joy and pain in our lives, and these are also connected to the trauma and the healing that is capable for each of us. And attached to each of these areas, we have some concepts to help us understand it and to help survivors understand how healing operates. First, it's important to remember that when survivors experience sexual violence, they experience trauma in multiple parts of their lives. There's these changes in all types of ways, and this can lead to traumas immediately after and later on in their life. So for example, if someone was exploited while applying for some benefits, it's likely that they'll have trouble doing so in the future, which can lead to negative effects on their ability to meet their basic needs, also within their body. It's also likely that they may have a strained or non-existent relationship with people in those similar roles going forward as well. That initial hurt or trauma can have lasting effects that can show up months, years, or decades later, and they might be compounded by the original trauma that they faced. So, with that in mind, which areas of Jaden's life were impacted by the trauma that he experienced? So I'm going to read the traumas that Jaden experienced that we know about, and then I'm going to put the poll on the screen, and you can select your answer. Jaden was sexually abused. He is currently being paroled and needs a place to stay. His mother wants him to forgive his great uncle. He has nightmares at night about the abuse. He's worried about reconnecting with his girlfriend, and he's worried about going back to church. So, which of these areas of hurt and healing do you think were impacted in Jaden's life? And I'm going to put the poll on the screen now, I think. Here we go. Which one of these areas do you want to oh, this is the wrong poll. Sorry, everyone. That was a little bit confusing. I'm going to end this poll. I'm going to launch the poll 1. Sorry. There we go. Poll 1. Which area of hurt and healing do you think are impacted by the sexual violence Jaden experienced? Which areas of hurt and healing do you think are impacted by the sexual violence that Jaden experienced? So we have heart and mind, body, basic needs, spirituality, relationships, culture, sexuality. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll and share the result. So the most agreed upon answer was heart and mind, followed by relationships, and then body. And then the least agreed upon answer was basic needs at 43%, and then culture at 45%. Yeah. Thank you all for participating. And then someone said they clicked every single answer. So here are the ones that we easily identified from what we already know about Jaden. And other folks said they did too. Yeah. Basic needs, right? So he is about to be paroled and needs a place to stay. The basic need is housing there, right? His heart and mind. He has nightmares about the abuse, so this affects his ability to sleep, his emotions. It sounds like there might be some anxiety there, but I don't know. I need to ask Jaden. The relationships with his mother and his girlfriend we are mentioned in what we know about Jaden. Spirituality, we know that he's worried about going back to church. And his body, he's unable to sleep, which is affecting his body's ability to function. And someone said in the chat, I did too. I believe sexual violence impacts every part of us. Right. From what we know about Jaden's life already, we can probably guess that there's an impact on his sexuality too, considering when the violence happened. If we want to take this a little bit farther, Jaden is probably feeling a little bit stressed too, right? Which can lead to other negative effects. And at the very least, negative effects to his heart and mind and relationships. And lack of sleep might make us tired at our job. It might make us crabby and have a lack of patience for those around us, right? So there's that relationship to the other parts. And the underlying issue of these effects is the sexual violence that Jaden experienced. But what Jaden might say when he's meeting with us as advocates might be things that are more clear-cut and tangible on the surface. He might say, I need a place to stay. I don't want to stay with my mom. This is one of the things that's most clearly related to the violence he's experienced and may have the clearest solution. But it's our job as advocates to help make those connections to the other things that are happening in Jaden and the survivors we're working with lives. And again, we're only seeing a very small snippet of Jaden's life, and we don't know the whole range of traumas that might have happened, and this still isn't everything that Jaden has experienced. We just talked about the violence he experienced, right? We will miss all of the different health and social factors that impacted him and how they're related to all the other traumas that he's experienced. And this really resonates with what someone said in the chat, right? All of these different areas are connected. This concept is about realizing we need to heal in all of these different areas of our lives, and survivors need to heal in all these different areas of our lives. Often, areas that are acknowledged as being hurt by sexual violence, right, are heart, mind, and then the body. And we see this with an emphasis on sexual violence services being boiled down to sexual assault nursing or forensic exams, and then also counseling, right? If someone experiences sexual violence, that's what we tell them that they need to do. Or that's what society might tell them that they need to do. Treatment or healing in these areas emphasizes a focus on the immediate, right? What the immediate pain is. But we know that when sexual violence happens, all parts of survivors' lives are affected. And if we believe that, we have to focus on healing in those places that are affected in survivors' lives, even if those effects don't show up till much later. So let's just focus on these two areas again, heart and mind, and then body. Even if we just wanted to focus on the effects on the body, often only the short-term outward pain is focused on. But not the long-term effects like chronic pain, gastrointestinal issues, gland and hormone growth. I recently went to the National Sexual Violence Conference this year. It was amazing. And one of the trainings that I went to was about pelvic health and sexual violence, right? And there was just so much I learned even in that one training. But this, again, wasn't about the initial hurt that happened. All of these things are related to sexual violence. And I want to ask you all, how do you think our field would look different if we focus on healing chronic stomach pain, or if we focus on pelvic health and the relationship to sexual violence? Another example of how sexual violence impacts us is in our culture. Particularly for some Native communities, sexual violence has disrupted teaching of cultural practices, such as art making and cooking and language. And so now some of these practices are lost. Well, actually, they were stolen, to be very precise with our language. And this can lead to loss of relationships to others from that culture, but also to a loss of traditions and spiritual practices, which can be further traumatizing for survivors, right? So this loss of culture leads to a loss of relationships and spirituality. All these things, again, are connected. So when we start looking at all of the areas, instead of just focusing on one or two, we can develop a more holistic response to survivors' needs. I can give our interpreters a moment to switch, sorry. On the surface, it might be hard for us and survivors to make these connections, but if we take time to think about it, we can see how sexual violence impacts several parts of a person and how this can help reveal the specific healing needs that a person has and we as advocates can help them achieve those needs. So here we have Jaden again, and this time we're going to learn more about Jaden and his brother, Randy. After attending a group while incarcerated, Jaden reached out to his older brother, Randy, who he hadn't talked to since Randy moved out. Jaden told Randy about the sexual abuse, and his brother shared that their great uncle had done the same thing to him. They agreed to stay connected, and Randy wrote a letter to the parole board on Jaden's behalf. Now again, if we just focus on getting Jaden housing, we would have missed not only how his relationship to his brother affected his healing, and that helped Jaden in another area in his life. We can see that they both experienced something traumatic, and while this contributed to their trauma, it's connecting them now, and this reconnection is leading to positive support in Jaden's life. So by exploring this place of hurt in Jaden's life, right, the lack of connection with his brother, we were able to see how this might be an eventual place of healing, not only by connecting with his brother, but also by connecting with others in the group at the prison, right? So that's that relationship part of the circle. We also would have missed the potential opportunity to connect with another survivor, Randy, who also may be in need of healing services. And Jaden and Randy's reconnection leads to our third concept. By knowing the places of joy, happiness, or support in survivors' lives, we can also help them develop that into a healing strategy for when they are triggered or encounter additional trauma. And some people might say activated instead of triggered, and I want to make sure that we're becoming familiar with all types of language that we can use to talk about trauma. Well, sometimes when we talk about the areas of hurt and healing, people understand that we're asking them to look at the places of hurt collectively, but that's kind of where the understanding stops. But again, as advocates, we're asking you all to look at the places of hurt and healing, and these can be both, right? When we identify these places of healing and help survivors figure out the places of joy or happiness in their lives, we can help them find hope that there is healing and that there's hope for the future. If we're only seeing survivors as traumatized victims, we're only seeing them as a part of themselves and parts of their experience, their culture, and their identities. If we really believe survivors are resilient, then we can believe that they can find positive things in their life or have had positive experiences that can help them identify what is healing for them personally. When we find that survivors have hurt in a place or experience trauma in one area, this can be a place where they, one, need to heal, and two, can potentially find a place or sense of calm, safety, connection, and hope that can eventually lead to healing. So let's see how Jaden's hurt and connection is related to a place of healing in his current life. While incarcerated, Jaden was able to apply for the pet program they had at his facility. Jaden discovered that he was good with animals, especially cats. He was able to get his associate's degree so he could become a vet tech once released. I also want us again to see how the connection in this example isn't necessarily with people, but with animals. Connections or relationships come in many different forms, and connections with the animal and nature can also be a source for healing for survivors, and that's often overlooked. Also, Jaden's place of healing, animals, right, helped him be able to make steps to meet his basic needs and to prepare for his future. And that leads to our next concept. When there is a change in one area of a survivor's life, the other areas will be affected. And these areas influence each other. On the slide, you can see that there is a line connecting all the areas all the way around. There's also smaller lines that connect each of the areas to another area. And the reality is that there should be areas from each of the different ones back and forth, and this chart would look really complicated. But that makes sense, right? Some of you have already shared that. All these different parts of ourself are connected, and each of them spark change in the other. We've already kind of seen that when we were talking about Jaden's life. When there was a change to the relationship with his brother, he was able to improve his ability to meet his needs. A change in his ability to meet his needs, getting his college degree, was in part because he found a passion for cats and formed that relationship. Overwhelmingly, what we see is that where there is trauma in one area, it will exacerbate trauma in another area of hurt, and even if it's not the direct cause of it. On the flip side, where there's healing in one area, it will spread to another area, even if it's not the direct cause of that healing, right? We're going to read this next scenario. Once Jaden was released, he tried to keep up his exercise routine, but hurt himself at the gym. He wasn't able to keep up with his gym buddies the same after his injury. Reconnecting with his brother, Randy, he joined an online prayer group and connected with other East African men in his community. Even helped him improve his Tigrinya. I know I messed that up. I'm sorry to native speakers, which he hadn't spoken since he was a child. So here we can see the relationships between different areas were exact mirrors of each other. A decline in Jaden's body also caused a decline in the specific connections with the people he used to exercise with. It also probably caused him to feel some sadness too initially. So there's a change in his heart and mind as well, right? So a change in his body sparked a change in his relationships and sparked probably change in his heart and mind as well. But those positive relationships he had with Randy has prompted a change in his relationship with his faith, but also with his culture and with other people from his community, right? So there was another change there as well, and those are connected. Now we have another Jaden scenario. Jaden and his girlfriend Faith were able to talk to a faith-based therapist about some of the problems they were having with intimacy. While this made things better between them, Jaden's mother discouraged them from returning to the therapist. So I made this scenario to remind us that healing for survivors is not always going to be seamless, and it might come with some tension, right? Improvement in one area can cause a decline in another. In this scenario, Jaden was able to improve his heart and mind, sexuality, and relationship with his girlfriend, but there was a decline in the relationship with his mother. Some might say, right, that this is for the better, but only Jaden can be the judge of that, right? We don't get to make that choice for him. What we may want to ask Jaden is, how did what your mom say make you feel? Do you want to talk about what she said and how that might impact you in faith? It's about balance, right? And that intentionality. If survivors are putting all of their energy in just one of these areas, then it's likely that there will be little healing or maybe even some harm to the other areas. Instead, we want to encourage survivors to think about what they can do for healing in little ways instead of measuring progress in just one of these areas. Then we have our last concept. This chart is going to be individualized to survivors' specific identities, traumas, experiences, and culture. Since these slices on the chart are just made symmetrical for the purpose of PowerPoint, it's going to look different for every single person. For some people, these pieces might fit snugly together, right, and be equal. For others, they might feel very far apart. Maybe they have a lot of healing strategies for how to heal for their spirituality, but don't know how to find healing for the parts that were hurt by their culture. This chart is also going to be impacted by the different things they experience, pressures that they face, their identity, and their culture. My chart is not going to look like Norio's, and his doesn't look like mine. And that's okay, right? We as advocates need to be able to recognize this, validate it, and then be ready to offer that support. Okay, so we are going to take a break now. And Norio, you can pause the recording.
Actually, you'll have to do that since you started the recording. I'm so sorry.
Okay, let's hop back into it, you all. So what does that mean for advocacy, right? And this is our last section for today. We are going to keep this webinar very focused on the topic. We talked about the different areas, but how can having these examples impact the advocacy we provide or how we interact with survivors? So by thinking about the different areas of hurt and healing, we can then zoom out and think more about healing-centered advocacy. That means putting what people need to heal at the center of our advocacy and at the services we provide. It means that we consider the healing needs of a person in front of us seeking services. We also see them as a part of a larger community, as a family member, and as a loved one who are also in need of healing. Maybe not from sexual violence, but still from the trauma and oppression that impact their lives. If we do healing-centered advocacy, again, it doesn't mean that we bar survivors from interacting with systems. Instead, we let them know that there are options beyond systems that they can explore that may not have the same limitations. When we have healing-centered advocacy, there will be certain attributes. Our programs need to be able to provide support, understanding, and resources that help survivors achieve healing. They need to be places where survivors can access healing services long after they've experienced sexual violence. They can access healing services that are age appropriate. So for children, for teens and youth, adults, and then elder adults, and those services should not be the same, right? So the services that I'm offering to someone who's 12 should not be the same services that I'm offering in the same way to someone who's 74. They need to be spaces where survivors can define justice and accountability in a way that's healing for them. And they need to be able to access healing holistically in those multiple parts of their lives, also known as those different areas of hurt and healing. Just to be crystal clear, right? If we spend all of our time focusing on advocacy within systems and fixing systems and advocating for systems, we will not only, one, miss the vast majorities of survivors, right? So we know that the vast majorities of sexual violence survivors don't report. And if they do report, many are not satisfied with the response that they get. But all of our advocacy is centered on systems and systems focus, we won't have time to do anything else. We won't have time to try new strategies, to get to know community members, or make new partnerships because our advocacy will be preoccupied with the system that only works for some survivors. Additionally, the systems often focus on an individualized approach. And again, that doesn't reach everyone in our community who has experienced sexual violence, let alone trauma. And these are some of the other parts of sexual violence healing advocacy that will be encompassed or centered in our different approach. We have building community, addressing the body, a connection to nature, and that will be population specific. Now, we're not going to get into each of these today because we only have our 2 hours together. But today was designed to be like a primer or an introduction or even like before the 101 class, right? We will have trainings coming up that will focus more on these specific areas. And I've already said healing centered a lot, but our services need to go beyond just being healing centered. Also, to be healing focused. That means that there has to be a shift in what we as advocates in our programs view as important to us, what funding we go for, what projects we develop, and how we interact with survivors and those in our community as well. Okay, so some of you already might have done this poll earlier, but I'm going to relaunch the poll to ask this question. Which of these areas do you want to explore more in your own life? And so I'm going to pull up the poll now. Let's see if I can relaunch the poll too. Okay, I relaunched it. Which one of these areas do you want to explore more in your own life? Heart and mind, body, basic needs, spirituality, relationships, culture, sexuality. Which one of these areas do you want to explore more in your own life? So we're polling around 50% right now. I'd like to get that a little bit higher just to make sure everyone has a chance to participate. The options are heart and mind, body, basic needs, spirituality, relationships, culture, and sexuality. Okay. Thank you all for those who participated. I am going to end the poll now and share our results. So it looks like the most popular or the most selected answer was heart and mind, followed by spirituality, and then body. Does that make sense? So a lot of the things that we talked about today and those concepts already has been condensed into a very cool handout that is a part of a larger e-learning course that we've already created. So Norio is going to in the chat. Hopefully, we can also put the PDF in the chat. Now, if not, I will take time to do it at the end of the webinar. But so we have already created this really cool illustration with the help of the fabulous people who create our e-learning course to talk about the areas of hurt and healing in a worksheet. So I'll give you all a chance to download that and open it up, and then I will switch screens again. While we're waiting, I'll tell you a little about the e-learning course. So the e-learning course is 75 minutes. I really encourage you all to check it out. It also goes into a larger explanation of what healing is. It has interactive activities. It has resources. So again, I really encourage you all. Interviews from advocates. It's really cool. Go check it out. Okay, I'm going to switch screens and then show you all, hopefully, do a quick example of what the worksheet. Okay. Everyone see the areas of hurt and healing worksheet on my screen. Okay, I see some thumbs up. Thank you all. So again, we created this worksheet to basically summarize everything that we've talked about today. So there's a picture of a cactus, and each of the little branches has a symbol related to one of the areas of hurt and healing. And then if you go down to the next 2 pages, there's some questions and some questions and examples of what some of the areas of hurt and what some of the areas of healing could look like. That's what we're going to spend the rest of today talking about in this webinar. But just wanted to make sure you all have this resource ahead of time. And again, if you attended the webinar today, I will send you all a copy of this handout in the email. So now I'm going to switch back to my PowerPoint screen. So give me one moment. Okay. So you all can use this worksheet as a reminder, an example, and keep it at your desk, something to reference. Or you can use it as with survivors and help them map the different ways that they were infected by trauma, how the different areas of their lives impact one another, what helps them heal, and what area of healing that they want to work on. So here are some guiding questions. What is healing for you? What helps you feel cared for? And what helps you feel good and safe? So we're going to go through questions to ask for each of the 7 areas and identify different services that we can provide for each. But these baseline questions are our North Star, and we can apply them to our conversations with survivors. And if survivors ask us for examples, we should also be prepared to answer them in case they might want examples that we might use, but we want to make sure that we caveat that with that we're all different and our experiences are different, even if we've experienced similar things. Yes, and you might have noticed that in the worksheet, it's a cactus. The Rural Project in particular has a lot of things with trees on it, and I live in Arizona, so I wanted some Southwest representation in the type of greenery that we have in our publication. So that's why this one's a cactus. So what does it look like to find healing in our heart and minds? What would help the survivor feel safe and grounded in their own body? What would help them feel more control of their emotions? And what will help them feel more regulated? We know that our emotions and thoughts are guided by outside forces, but this area, and what we're talking about healing in this area, we're trying to think of things that we can do as a group, sure, but also things that we can do on our own that can help in our healing. This can be things like therapy, journaling, getting a cleaning service for your home, mindfulness activity, practicing choice points, and doing art. And just as a reminder, right, I know a lot of the things on this slide in particular are very quiet, still, and internally reflective activities. Healing is not always going to look like that. That's not healing for everyone. Sometimes healing is breaking plates. It's having a loud, snot-filled cry or going back in your backyard and yelling, right? And that's okay. Survivors expressing pain, anger, and frustration is an example of them being able to access full range of their emotions. And so whatever survivors need to do to get their emotions out without traumatizing someone else is what we should encourage them to do. Yeah, so someone asked about an example to expand on choice points. We actually already have a publication all about choice points, and I will send that one out to you all as well. I didn't think about putting this resource on the slide for Norio to put in the chat, but choice points is helping survivors figure out the places where they have options in their lives. So even if these choices are not ideal, they're still able to work through all the decisions that they can make. This can feel overwhelming for survivors, so sometimes having advocates to talk through or communicate through them with them can help them feel more calm and regulated about what they have power to do, change, or not do. Because Norio is so amazing, he has already found the link to that resource and put it in the chat for you all. Next, we have the body. Some questions when we're thinking about the body that we can ask are, what will help the survivor feel healthy, quote unquote, or physically well? What parts of the body do they want to reclaim after the sexual violence they experience? So this can be getting medication, exercising, having accompaniment to non-crisis medical appointments, acupuncture, smash rooms, and massages. So again, I'm not just telling you all the solution to healing is exercising. That's not it, right? But this can also be things like going to appointments, going to dental appointments, getting blood work done, and grooming ourselves as well. We know that the body, and someone even said it, a couple folks said it in the Mentimeter, the body keeps the score, right? The body is a really important part of our healing process. And this, again, goes far beyond just the physical parts that were injured during the initial violence. You'll notice that I put quote unquote healthy in on the slide because we do not get to determine what is healthy for someone or someone else. We might want to stray away from saying like this is healthy or unhealthy coping. Instead, what the survivor did to survive is what they needed to do to function. And we might say, how is that serving or not serving you in this moment? But what they needed to do to survive is what they needed to do. Next up, we have basic needs. And we put this one intentionally in the middle because, again, this is not the only thing that we want advocates to focus on. Yes, this might be the thing that survivors need first, but again, it's not the only thing that we want advocates to focus on, just the tangible things that are easy, that come in a checklist, right? We want to ask survivors what will help them get what they need to survive, what will help that survivor maintain or obtain the essentials they need to live a quote unquote safe life. And safe has to be defined by the individual survivor. Direct cash support. I wish our former colleague Rebecca was here. I would love her to just come in and talk about how important this is in the lives of survivors. But giving survivors the funds to decide what they need for their life directly is what we can do as advocates if we're really saying we want survivors to be empowered. Helping survivors apply for benefits and jobs, for helping survivors apply for jobs, insurance, and benefits, paying bills, breaking contracts, and getting security measures. So this is more than just getting food, water, and shelter, right? It's helping survivors meet all the needs that they have. And this can be helping them find a way to get around, receiving medical care, and helping them communicate in today's day and age, right? It means helping them get what they need to survive. This could be things like helping them apply for citizenship, tuition reimbursements, paying for childcare in arrears, getting on disability, all of these different things that are related to helping people maintain and obtain a safe, stable life. Some folks said, we like to say that survivors is the expert of their life and give them complete control of what is needed. Someone else said self-defense classes are really help a lot of survivors in sexual assault feel control and connected to their body. That might be helpful for some folks. We always give the caveat that with self-defense, it may not necessarily prevent another traumatic experience from happening. And so if that's what helps someone feels empowered, connect to their body, absolutely. But we also want to remind them that when trauma happens, it's likely that they may respond in the same way that the trauma happened the first time. So if they froze when the sexual assault happened once, they did self-defense practice and training, our bodies were right to remember what it felt like for that first response. So we just want to make sure that survivors aren't blaming themselves and are able to just know all the different factors. So, but thank you for sharing that. Next, we have spirituality, right? And this does not mean that we subscribe to one faith or religious orientation when we're talking to survivors. Instead, we want to ask what resources will help survivors feel more connected or repair their relationship to spirituality? How was the survivor's spirituality affected by the sexual violence that they experienced? And if the survivor practices or believes in a faith practice that's different than our own, we as advocates need to do our job and find someone who is of the same spiritual background and take the steps to educate that person before connecting them with survivors as well. Doesn't mean disclosing personal information, but making sure that they know about the dynamics of sexual violence. Some of these different ways are through meditation, faith-based therapy, holding community discussions with faith leaders, observing religious holidays, and holding ceremonies. So you may notice that there are 3 asterisks next to holding ceremonies, right? And just want to remind all of us that we should only be holding ceremonies if we're of that culture or that participate in that spiritual practice. And we may not be able to do it at our agencies. But if this is what survivors need for their healing, we need to be able to connect them with it. Doesn't mean that we necessarily have to do it in at our office. We already went over a couple different ways that Jaden's relationships were impacted, and we know that these connections and relationships influence so much in our lives. We can ask, what resources can help survivors build and repair relationships after sexual trauma? And what can help survivors connect with others after sexual violence? So again, I also want to caution us from saying, right, this is not just telling survivors to forgive the person that hurt you, to reconnect with them, and to suggest family therapy. You'll notice that these things aren't intentionally on the slide because while this might be helpful for some survivors, we don't want to push survivors to make these decisions. Instead, we can help them find ways to create new relationships, mend old ones, or end ones as they see fit and what works for their lives. All these might come with some difficulties, but if that's what a survivor wants, then we should help them navigate that. This can be things like practicing active listening, book clubs, couple and family therapy, boundary setting, letter writing, restorative circles, collective survivor action or organizing, and bands. And these are all different ways that we can connect with other people. Other part of relationships is a relationship with our environment. So we know, right, that going outside, even just for a couple minutes, can help people regulate their emotions and get some vitamin D, which helps in the area of our body. So the relationship with the earth and with animals and other living things is important. We want to ask, what will help the survivor feel more connected to other living things and to nature? This can be gardening, emotional support animals, hiking and nature walks, bird watching, foraging, camping, and canine and equine therapy. And it doesn't necessarily have to be helping someone get an emotional support animal or helping their animal achieve that status. It could just be helping them get some plants in the place that they live or getting a gerbil, right? Whatever is healing for that particular person. Then we have culture. And culture is often easily mixed in with discussions about relationships and spirituality and sexuality as well, but it also stands out in other places because culture impacts individuals and individuals also impact our culture. We should be thinking about what could help the survivor connect or reconnect to their identities, heritage, or community. How has sexual violence impacted your community? And what parts of the survivor's culture represent care, safety, and belonging. This can be helping someone to connect with their traditional foods or dress, having town halls about what has happened in your community, holding or assisting with traditional ceremonies, events, and holidays, and language classes. Community conversations addressing sexual trauma, right? This might be what the town hall about, can be very complex. And if this is something that your organization is interested or wants to do, please email me and we can talk more about this. And then last but not least, we have sexuality. What will help the survivor feel more comfortable and in tune with their sexuality? And this is not just helping survivors figure out if they want to be sexual ever again. It's going to be much more than that. It's helping them decide if and when, with what parameters they want to be sexual. It's helping them process past sexual experiences. It's connecting them with Two-Spirit LGBTQ resources, if that's what they want. It's helping them understand and find resources to make informed reproductive health choices. It's connecting them with resources to understand the different types of intimacy. And all of that goes beyond just individual sexual interactions. This can be things like sexual safety planning, STI and STD testing, sex therapy, reproductive health information, exploring intimacy in relationships, and doula training. I particularly wanted to highlight doula training because there is a lot of trauma for those around reproductive health, those giving birth, those getting anal genital exams. And so again, when we're talking about healing from sexual violence, this has to be a part of it too. So we reviewed a lot of information today. And so as we're wrapping up, I just also want to urge us to be patient with ourselves when we're thinking about these things, and also be patient with survivors. When we're talking about healing for survivors, right, it has to be these three things. It has to be self-identified. Survivors have to identify what helps them feel regulated, calm, and peaceful. It also has to be self-motivated. They have to figure out for themselves what's healing. It has to be personalized. Doesn't mean it will happen faster because of effort or lack of perceived effort, but it has to be something that they want to do for themselves. It also has to be self-paced. Survivors should know that their healing journey is their own and is unique. How long it takes them to find healing is going to depend on them alone, and they shouldn't compare their healing to anyone else's. We also want to remember, right, that overall, healing and exploring healing can be overwhelming and can bring up unwanted and unexpected feelings. And that's why it's up to us as advocates to remind survivors that this is a spiral, right? Not a landing place. And we're going to continue to support them when they're up, where they're feeling like I'm healed, I've done it, I've finished, and when they're down, when they're feeling activated or re-traumatized or scared. That is the job of the advocates, and we're here to support them in their healing. And with that, are there any more questions? And you feel free to put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A box. If there's any of the topics that you want to go back to or know more about, let me know. Someone asked what happened to Jaden. Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe come to the next webinar and find out. Graydon's story isn't done though. So it doesn't look like there are more questions. I'm going to keep the webinar open for a little bit, but I just want to say thank you all so much for attending. Again, you can email me. My email is on the slide, lashae at IOWACASA.org. lashae at IowaCASA.org. Thank you all so much for attending. I hope you all have a great weekend.